Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the NextUp Town Hall. We're excited to talk about digital innovation today. I'm your host, Jeremy Goldberg, president and quarterback at LeagueApps. You're joined by almost 450 organizations who have signed up to be here today. We're excited to be part of these conversations, even as we're being told to distance from one another. And I try to take advantage of that from Rich. This is still an opportunity for us to come together, right? Even as we distance, how do we come together as a community? And that's what these series of events have been about. Look, more bad news that came out today about the economy, maybe a ray of hope as Fauci was talking yesterday about school coming back in the fall. But we recognize how difficult a toll this continues to take on everybody, personally and professionally, and wish everyone well in terms of their health. And also recognize that as organizations, as you listen to this, many of you are not taking pay. You've had to make difficult personnel decisions. You're dealing with challenging situations with families in your organizations. And so we acknowledge that, and we commend you on your commitment to consistently learn and get better. I'm not overly religious, but I'm going to get derived some ideas from our religious tradition. Because if you think about this time of year, there was Passover last night, and it's going to be Easter this weekend, Good Friday tomorrow. And if you think about what the story of Passover and Easter are about, right? And I was talking to my team about this yesterday. It's the story of trials and tribulations. It's a story of loss of freedom. It's a story of loss of life, right? But ultimately, those stories are about hope, right? Ultimately, it's about redemption. It's about emergence. It's about renewal. There's a reason why that takes place during our spring calendar. And I think there's something that is a parallel to how we need to think about this situation right now. All of us are being tested in our own way. Literally, our freedoms are being constrained by being what we're told to stay in the same place, right? There are challenges that we are experiencing, but there is a way that we'll get through this, right? And there's something larger about this journey that we're on. The Pope, no less of an authority, yesterday was talking about how the universe is speaking to us and we just need to listen, right? And there's that old adage, everything happens for a reason, right? So the question is what is the reason that you can find in what is happening right now, right? Because ultimately, when you reach that destination, when you emerge from this, you ultimately become strengthened by the journey. That is what those stories of Passover and Easter are about, right? You're strengthened by this journey. And I think by being here today, you're recognizing the need to strengthen yourselves, your organizations, and opportunity. Throughout the past few weeks, it's almost been a month now, I've talked about this biography that I've been reading about Muhammad Ali. I'd acknowledge two things. One, it's a very long book, so I'm not all the way through it. It's by Jonathan Eig, I think it is, E-I-G. I know people asked this question last time. But this great book about Muhammad Ali, he's full of all kinds of sayings, right? So I don't know how much longer this will go on, but I feel like I'll continue to be able to use Muhammad Ali sayings every week. And I think there's this great analogy. So one of the things that Muhammad Ali talks about is he said, a man who views the world the same at 50 as he did at 20 has wasted 30 years of his life. A man who views the world the same at 50 as he did at 20 has wasted 30 years of his life. If you think about the situation right now, if you view the world of youth and local sports the same way you did as you went into this crisis, you're wasting this crisis. You're wasting the opportunity to think differently, reflect differently about your organization, about your team, about your programs, about the way you think about the kind of youth sports experience that you want to deliver in the future. And when I think about the trends that we think a lot about at LeagueApps that I've been speaking about for years, that I've been watching, the two biggest ones are ultimately the structure of youth and local sports are changing, right? There is a consolidation. Bigger organizations are getting bigger. One of the most common questions I get asked is how I should value my youth sports organization, right? There are all these questions of ultimately around consolidation that seems more and more likely as you have more professionalization or corporatization of this world of youth sports. And in a situation like today, where more organizations are struggling, that's only going to be more likely. And the second trend that we spend a lot of time thinking about is technology and the impact that will have on the youth sports experience, right? Obviously, at LeagueApps is the operating system for the youth and local sports industry. That is our business. But we think that so much of the future of youth sports, the future of local sports, will be influenced by technology. And that, I think, is evident by how organizations are responding now. And that's exactly why we put together today's session on digital innovation. And recognize that those two trends, consolidation and technology innovation, reinforce each other, right? Because the organizations that are figuring it out are the ones that are going to succeed, right? So throughout this period, I've been saying to our team, you've got to survive to thrive. And I think this conversation is not just about the survival. We've talked a lot about that over the past few weeks. It's really about thriving. And that's the invitation that we give you today. Now, as you know, that these NextUp events, this is about bringing together a community of these emerging youth sports professionals, local sports professionals, people that aren't doing this as a hobby, And the commitment we made when we started that conference last November, and we've continued on now, is really how do we help bring this community together, provide professional development, leadership, and insight. And one of the best parts about that is not recognizing that we don't have all the answers at LeagueApps, that the community is who have the answers, and incredible other technology entrepreneurs and other experts, which is exactly where Sandeep and Alex and Rich come in today's conversation. And so again, I think this is an opportunity to learn. In today's session, you'll find me engaging Rich and Alex and Sandeep in questions around really important trends, right? Everything from about AI to virtual coaching, to maybe augmented reality or virtual reality, or the way we think about the way we consume content and live streaming. These are concepts that would have been crazy to talk about when I was dominating the JCC League back in the 1980s. I can only think about the kind of athlete I might have been if I was using Alex's tools at home, if my coaches had the benefit of what Famer offers through Rich, and of course, I would be able to point to visual evidence of my greatness if I was BallerTV had streamed the games and I had kept records of this. For now, you're just going to have to believe me. The final thing I'll say as we get into this is, I said it before, the Muhammad Ali analogies app, because champions get knocked down, but it's how you get back up, and that's what's going to happen in the esports industry, and we see that more than ever before. A couple tools to kind of assist the conversation today. One is you'll see a chat tool on your right-hand side. This is where you should post any questions that you have, and as we have the discussion, I'll be leading the conversations with Rich, Alex, and Sandeep to start with, and then I'll really be looking to you all to guide the conversation. So what is it that you want to know and understand? So use that chat tool to submit those questions, and then I'll be using with my team, figuring out the best way to be able to communicate. The second thing is we've got a Slack group, the first industry Slack group for youth and local sports. Alex and Sandeep and Rich will all be part of that. So encourage you to come join that group. We'll make sure that information is posted as well that you have access to. And again, if you don't know what Slack is, and you go through this entire process and this entire crisis and don't know what Slack is, you're slacking, right? That is the definition, because you're missing the opportunity of understanding a free tool that you should probably consider adopting for your organization. It's a really amazing tool, and our team can help guide you through and how to use that. So as I jump in, I'm going to pose a question to the group, right? First time we've done this, and I'm going to have Tex queue up this question, and we're really curious about two questions. One, curious about how you guys are thinking about virtual coaching and training today. What's the way you're going about doing that, right? What's the platform you're using around doing that? And then the second is, have you taken any steps around mental? So the first question, I'll read it actually. If you're offering virtual coaching or training program, what platform are you using? Is it Zoom or some webinar service? Is it some kind of social service? Is it Famer or some kind of mobile app? And I should include HomeCourt in that category. Or are you using email or a LeagueApps messaging tool by which to potentially get into the virtual coaching and training thing? So take a second to answer that question, because I'll use the results to kind of guide the conversation. Again, are you doing anything on virtual coaching or training right now? And if you are, what are those questions? Okay, the second question we're going to come to at the end of this session, and that will lead into the topic that we're going to focus on next week around mental health, mental performance, which is a critical tool that I think organizations can use for themselves. So that's the poll, and I'm excited to get back into it. So I'll give people another 10 seconds to answer that question, and then we'll jump back in. So I'm excited. We have an all-star panel that are joining us today, and I'm fortunate that I've gotten to know these guys for a while, and they each bring something really unique. And I think today's conversation is not about an infomercial, right? You're going to get a sense of what these different technology companies do, but really more than that, you're going to understand why they do it. What are the trends that you should understand? What are the things that you can learn? And again, this is the start of a conversation that can continue on Slack, that can continue on the LeagueApps blog as we create more and more content in partnership with these guys. And again, part of our vision as an organization is we can't be the best at all technology. So we really like to align ourselves and integrate with all the best kinds of tools which these guys represent. So we've got three great speakers today, and I'm going to start with Rich Abend. I've known Rich for a while, but I think he's becoming famous. I think Rich is getting all kinds of press off of this. So I'm curious to know, and I think if we can take down the poll so I can see Rich's face again. Rich is someone who is the definition of an entrepreneur, right? And how he's persevered in building companies. He's been in the sports sector for a long period of time. And he's basically building the first mobile youth and amateur sports coaching and mentorship platform. And it's a vision he's had that's more necessary than ever before, but he can draw upon 20 years of his experience. So Rich, I'll pose the first question to you as we understand kind of what Famer's about. What prompted you to start Famer? And why do you feel so smart right now about doing so?
Well, thank you for that, Jeremy. That was a great introduction. And thanks to LeagueApps for having us. Again, I think the whole industry should applaud what you guys are doing by taking a leadership role. It's definitely tremendous. It's needed. I come from a family of coaches. I coach myself, so this isn't just a professional passion. This is really a personal passion and something that I live and breathe and coach myself as well. So it's a really important time for this industry, obviously. For Famer, as you said, right, we are a distance learning and mobile coaching tool, right? So for us, we were having a lot of success pre-COVID-19. And really what that means is we're trying to build the first sports education technology platform and coach operating system. So it's a sports coaching distance learning app that enables personal and private team and group and individual programs with interactive feedback between athletes, their coaches, and their clubs. Probably in the last, I sort of put the tipping point as Thursday, March 12th, when everything, in my world and most of our worlds got canceled. I've probably had, no less than 300 conversations with folks that are here on this webinar and across the entire industry. So really have a good finger on my pulse and understanding of like what organizations are going through. And we know that it's not a one size fits. It's not a one size fits all. It's really, really challenging out there right now. So for us, the way we thought about why we started Famer a year ago, which is for us, was we saw all these great clubs, all these great organizations, these great coaches and trainers who had a story to tell, right? They wanted to be able to utilize technology in a different way, right? They wanted to create content. They have this incredible way that they think and teach and train the sport in which they work in, but there was really no mechanism, no platform that connected the club, the coaches, the parents, and the athletes with a way to continue the kids, keep them training, keep them engaged, and keeping moving in the right direction. We always talk about the fact that, a couple of things. Number one, just like in what happened in school in education technology, right, where it wasn't too long ago where kids would come home from school and you'd say, how was school today? And kids would say good, and you would have no idea what was going on in school. We think the same challenge exists in the world of youth and amateur sports, which is there's no connective tissue to keep the kids training, keep them moving in the right direction. So even the most with it kids forget, most of what they learn when they're in group and team training, or they're not getting the personal attention, number one. Number two, kids most of the time don't know how to train and practice on their own. So they go home and they're, instead of training like the skills and drills and the things that are going to make them a better basketball player, for example, they're going and doing, Kevin Durant one-footed step back jump shots. And the third thing is, mom and dad are completely out of the loop on how to actually support their child around their sports journey, right? No matter what that kid is trying to accomplish, whether they're just trying to make the club, make the starting team, get better at whatever it is that they're doing, we want to empower mom and dad to be able to support that. Our model, however, was a little bit different, like I said before, which is we actually want to create content. We're not just a tech platform that enables this communication and distribution of content. We're actually content creators. So like I said before, these great clubs and organizations and coaches and trainers, they have this incredible story to tell, the way that they teach, the way that they train. So my example before, like education technology, where when that communication is coming, it's coming from your teacher, your school, somebody who knows that kid. Right now, you can go on YouTube and there are 5 billion skills and drills, and however many there were before a month ago, there's even that much more today, right? So there's a lot of places to get that. But what's missing is a real, creating a structured and private club and communication-based community for these clubs and organizations with their own content, the way that they teach, the way that they train, their personality, their language. These are the ones that have the direct knowledge of the kids. So their ability to engage, communicate, and give those kids feedback through simple tools like telestration, voice over text is really what we found like was missing from the community. So our business model, and then I'll finish up here, is a little bit different in that we don't, for, again, pre-COVID-19, again, and post-COVID-19, we never charge the clubs or the coaches for our platform. It's always free. So what we do is we actually come, whether we're producing the content for you, with you, or editing it for you, we're actually uploading professionally based and professionally shot and curated content on your behalf. We're giving you this coaching library that now you can actually go run and communicate and teach and train with as an extension of your program. what we were doing before COVID-19 is mom and dad were actually paying for this tool to keep their kids on track as an extension of the coaching program. Today, obviously, where we understand that organizations are in need, they either don't want to give back, they don't want to give refunds, or are looking for new ways to obviously engage their audience. So throughout these next couple of months, we're also trying to be there for the industry and make sure that if mom and dad have already paid or don't have the money to pay, we want to keep the kids engaged, we want to keep the clubs training, we want to keep them connected.
So Rich, so I appreciate you sharing all that. And again, it seems the way you described your tool is that you're helping organizations do this themselves. And you're really giving them a platform by which to figure out how to take what they do on the field and translate in a way that's very personal to that organization. So that you're working very closely with those organizations and really enabling them to create their own content. Is that a fair summary?
That is correct. So again, before social distancing, we're actually content creators as well. So we actually come to, clubs and groups, fields all over the country, and we're putting their coaches, their trainers, the way that they talk the game, the way that they teach the game, their fields, their sponsors, whatever it is that makes it feel personalized and customized to that club and organization, we're creating that for them. Today, obviously, with our social distancing challenges, we are enabling them to utilize our platform to go upload their own content. We have some off-the-shelf content as well. We certainly, are giving organizations that use as well. But for the most part, these great coaches and organizations are sitting in their homes all over the country with their iPhones, and they have all these ideas and things in their head, whether they have content created and produced already or not. Now we're helping them, and we're actually just really helping them understand what short form actionable mobile video should feel like, look like, and how it should act, because as we know, that's the way kids and parents learn today.
Yeah, great. And I'll ask for a 45-second example. What's one great example of how a youth organization might be using this right now that you're pretty impressed with how they've deployed this so far?
Yeah, so we work with a bunch of partners across a bunch of different sports. We have one organization that we work closely with called Dusk, Downtown United Soccer Club, which is a partner of you guys as well. I know that you guys do some things with them.
Yeah,
and what's great about it is, and they're big New York City downtown soccer club, very sizable, 501(c)(3), but they do camps, clinics, they do a little bit of everything. But what I liked about their organization was a couple of things. One, we were already working with them on their camp, their summer camps, their rec program. So we have a product called Fame or Play, which is an extension of that, which is like a broadcast distribution once a week. The young developmental kids get the content and they're able to stay with it as an extension of their classes. But before COVID really hit, they saw that coming and they actually jumped on it and said, we want this for our academy kids because all practices, all games are going to be canceled. And we got 700 kids loaded up onto the system instantly and connected them with their coaches. They already had content created and they're treating it like weekly sessions, multi-communication, there's engagement and actually accountability back to their coaches, as well as, actually expecting videos back of the kids performing the skills and drills.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Rich. And again, it's great to hear kind of that approach and kind of, again, you've been on the early side of this curve. Alex, I'll go to you next. And I met Alex a few times through our relationships, mutual relationships with the NBA. The NBA is an investor in HomeCourt, and Alex is part of the founding team and the VP of strategy, marketing, communications, and partnerships. So pretty much everything. He's like a point forward for HomeCourt and Next Team. And one of the things that's blown me away is the caliber of the technology that you guys have created with HomeCourt is really embracing this idea of artificial intelligence, AI, computer vision. And so when you think about that kind of deep tech and how you're leveraging it, I just love to understand a little bit more about explain that for everybody. How does this work? What is AI? What is computer vision? And how is that related to what it is that you're creating at HomeCourt? And then we'll dive in a little more specifically about what you're doing.
Sure. So I appreciate this opportunity, Jeremy. Thanks so much. And a big fan of kind of all the products and services that everybody here provides and the community that you guys brought together. So Next Team, I'll start with Next Team because it's the parent company. HomeCourt's actually the app. But so Next Team, we're a mobile artificial intelligence company in sports, and so and augmented reality as well. And when I say AI, we work on a particular kind of school of AI called computer vision. And computer vision is essentially like teaching your camera to understand what it sees. But we do that with mobile cameras in particular, right? And so, the first technology that we built when we launched HomeCourt, and HomeCourt's the app built on that technology for basketball. And the first technology we built, the first app we built with that technology was shot tracking. And we launched that, I think, July of 2018. And essentially what we did was we taught the camera to understand, oh, okay, that's a hoop, that's a basketball, the 3D geometry of a court, and then be able to use all those different building blocks and say, okay, when this person takes a shot, where did they make it? Where did they miss it? And then obviously in real time, give you that feedback just using your phone. And so, when we grew up playing basketball, is like, if you're lucky to have somebody there count that for you, most likely not. But this way, like every time you went to go work out,
but then you can just make up the count, Alex.
Exactly. Like, I coached a little bit too, and you tell your kids, I want everybody to make 100 free throws before next practice, and then they turn in a worksheet and be like, yeah, I did that, and I was like, why are we still like 50% from the free throw line at games, guys? Right. And so, look, there was just no real, and honestly, the way that we had been doing that practice, the same way, maybe not exactly the same way, but it really hasn't changed for like 50 years, right? And so since the invention of basketball, like the way like Michael Jordan went out to work out himself, the way I like try to practice myself, definitely different skill level, but like essentially the experience is really much the same. It's just you, a basketball, and hoop, and maybe you knew how good you did today versus yesterday or the week before if you're by yourself, and maybe not. But our focus has always been on kind of that experience, which is like, if you even if you're on a team, even if you're in a camp and part of a great organization, and we all parents here, we send our kids to basketball camps all the time, but there's all this time that like they don't spend, you only have 2 or 3 practices a week together outside of games, and but the way you get better is not necessarily only during that time, right? Just like your kids are in school for 5, 6 hours a day, but where their development's actually happening is when they're working on their own a lot of the time. And so we really kind of focused on that experience and how do we make that experience, bring it to the 21st century and make that more fun and engaging. And so that's essentially what we've been focused on. HomeCourt, was our first kind of like, venture into that thesis. We started with basketball. People ask us why basketball. We're just like, we just really like basketball. My dad wishes we did golf, but we just really like basketball. And so we started with shot tracking, and then we introduced kind of the augmented reality part of our experience with some of the dribble workout where you use your front-facing camera. And this was really fun for us because it really introduced the idea of like borrowing EA Sports tagline a little bit, like literally putting you in the game. And so, in this way, kind of like a Microsoft Kinect did back in the day, but just using your iPad or iPhone, we would actually put you into an augmented reality game where you're actually interacting with the iPad physically. And so the first version of that was, we would throw up kind of different virtual dots, kind of borrowing from the tennis, the tennis ball dribbling drill a little bit and designing around that, and counting people's dribbles, timing it, gamifying it so that you have different levels, you have personal record you want to beat, leaderboards beyond that. And honestly, right now, that's been by far our most popular experience in the app because, a lot of hoops, I don't know about where you all live, but, they're shutting down the parks here, taking down the hoops. And so, people are kind of craving, just being able to participate in the game that they love and the sport that they love. And this is one way to do it. But it's also the competition part of it. Like if you play sports, you miss the competition as much as anything else. And it's hard to be just competitive with yourself. So we're seeing like, people posting their dribbling challenges and their activities on social media and challenging their friends and their teams. And we're kind of focusing on that. And then we eventually did some more activities with using that same tech, augmented reality, to do stuff without a basketball. And so, agility drills, stuff that, a lot of other sports can obviously, take advantage of in addition to basketball, but kind of moving down the line there. And that's also been really, really popular as of late.
Yeah, what's interesting to think about, just so we put a fine point about like this augmented reality, Google just has released, or it gets more prominent, this kind of augmented reality feature. You could like search for like a tiger and then you could hold it up, and I can take a picture of my kid with a tiger in the background that looks like they're hanging out with a tiger, right? And
Yeah.
so in your case, I feel like I think I said this once, that HomeCourt, it's like the death of the cone industry, because you don't even need cones, right? Like literally through augmented reality, you feel like you're jumping around on cones, right? And but you actually don't need the cones, right? So it's fascinating to think about where that comes in, because it makes this all pretty accessible. How are you seeing that complement? So you have people out there that are running youth sports organizations, local sports organizations for a living. How is that used as a tool for those organizations, or how might that be used as a tool?
Absolutely.
And again, as I talk to Alex, if you have questions, go to that questions tab and feel free to type that in. But go ahead and explain how this might integrate to the way that organizations are operating.
Absolutely. And I think you nailed the term that we use a lot here is we believe innovation is all about making technology accessible, right? And that's why mobile is so important to us, because we were just like, you don't want to ask the consumer or the athlete or the user to have to like do so much create more friction for them. If they have something in their pocket that they can use, can we squeeze as much technology possible into that experience and bring in and create in a more unique experience on top of that? And so what we're seeing is an organization. I'll use an example. There's a basketball academy, and this is actually in Australia, in Victoria. It's called Frankston Blues. It's pretty well known. They have like hundreds of teams kind of part of this academy kind of infrastructure, and obviously Australia went into shelter in place around the same time we did about a few weeks ago, and they basically pulled all their athletes onto HomeCourt, created a team for them, and then basically have been using it as a virtual like home game activities for them every week. So they've tracked over, I'm just gonna, give me 1 second, I want to get these numbers right because they're pretty eye-popping. But there's like 300 some players on there right now. They recorded over 57,000 workouts, tracked over 1.3 million dribbles. So I'm just, which just blows my mind. 40,000 shots, and the innovation is really, like to your point, Rich and Jeremy, coming really from the community. So what they're doing is they're challenging their kids every day. They have like Player of the Week, and they're giving away prizes. They've also organized a whole tournament with sister academies across Australia to compete against one another. And so which academy is going to have the most shots recorded this week, the most dribbles, have the best, which kid is going to have the best performance overall. It's pretty exciting to see. They're basically doing their own Olympics, in absence of us being actually to participate in these things. And I think one of the values we provide is because we can provide that data and the video as well, and it's fun, and it's just fun. And I think that's the thing that we hear from our community the most, is that like, my kids love this. They miss the competition. They get to compete with their own personal records, but they also get to compete with their peers in a really fun way. And I think I think a lot of us here are educators. I'm married to one. We're used to work at education technology, and the one thing about education is if the kids love learning the skill, they're just going to learn it faster. And so for us, it's really about and I think we used to do this in practices, right? We used to be like, okay, like how do we make this training thing fun? How do we make it a little competitive so that they're going to want to keep at it? And obviously the gaming industry has done such a good job of this. So I think a lot about and I think a lot of the creativity coming from the community is like we think about the competition, think about what we're competing with kids' attention, right? It's not it's stuff like Fortnite and TikTok. It's like that's the type of engagement they expect, right? Especially on their own personal time. And it's hard to compete with. And so our philosophy is like, hey, how do we borrow some of those designs and the gamification of it and bring it to physical activity and movement? And can we make that really, really fun too? And again, the education technology community has done that with Duolingo. You get points. There's all these different things that you can do to make learning fun. But can we do that for physical education as well? And I think that's been our approach.
Yeah, and I'm eager to get back into that. We'll get everyone to comment on this, because I think one of the important trends that we think about is and we share these beliefs when we were at the NextUp conference in the fall, which is that the voice of kids in driving and influencing decisions could be bigger than ever before. And so understanding that in terms of gamification or interactivity, which we'll talk about what that means, or in Rich, in your case, you alluded to mobile, are both part of that. So as we listen to Rich and Alex, what I'm really struck by is the really complementary strategies for any organization that is out there running these sports experiences. On one hand, Rich is basically saying, how do we extend the influence of your coaches digitally by giving the ability to create content and programs that are unique to your organization that extend your brand and your influence? What Alex is basically saying is there is universal application to artificial intelligence or augmented reality, where you can actually gamify and make practicing more fun. And those are tools that kids might do on their own. So, you know, it's one thing to go shoot free throws, right? It's another thing to go like do specific kinds of drills unique to your club that they're going to want you to use to be a great soccer player, right? And so those are complementary things that I think you know, every organization can think about these as part of their toolkit. Last but not least, let's turn to Sandeep and BallerTV. And you know, you're the kind of, I think the way they talk about BallerTV is live amateur sports. I know you've been part of the founding team since 2016, and you know, it's so I guess the first question I pose to you, Sandeep, is how do you think about and what did you see as the opportunity around the opportunity of live streaming and live video? Like, why was there a need for this before? And then what are you seeing as the potential use case coming out of this crisis that we're in right now?
Yeah. First off, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Jenny and Bharat and the whole LeagueApps team. I think what you guys are doing here in terms of just organizing community and what was, you know, traditionally and historically such a fragmented space. I think you guys are doing such an awesome job in bringing it all together. And we certainly take a lot of the learnings from your weekly emails and newsletters, and certainly these town halls are great forums to all aggregate and discuss best practices. But to your question, the opportunity we saw in this space was content capture. Really, it was you know, a lot of our founding team came from a background of you know, sports playing a deep role in their lives, and then it coming to a screeching halt, right? You kind of don't have those memories, you don't have that content to be able to prove, Jeremy, that you know you were once a baller, or Alex and his comparable skill set to Michael Jordan. Like we aimed to solve that problem. We got our start in basketball in about late 2016, early 2017, live streaming club basketball games at the elite level. So starting in our backyard in LA with you know, an event every weekend, and quickly growing that to 10,000 games across the entire club season, to what it is today, you know, where it's 250,000 games live streamed a year across not only boys basketball, but girls basketball, volleyball, baseball, softball, and soon to be soccer. And so, you know, what we, you know, the sort of building blocks that allowed for that to happen was not just like building live streaming technology that made sense for the sports world and the contextual items that we're all used to in a sports broadcast. You know, we never believed that Facebook Live, Periscope, and those homogenous apps were going to solve the sports world's problems, because you know they were never going to have scoreboards and team names and live scoring and things like that. So that live streaming technology is at the forefront, but behind the scenes, what we quickly realized is that you know these games aren't always played at you know the most modern facilities or facilities that you know would support live streaming, and so we quickly had to become as good on the logistics and operations side of things as anything else, right? So how do you get the right live streaming equipment at the right time, at the right place, with the right internet that makes it viable in the club basketball world, right, or the club sports world? These aren't games being held one at a time. These are games being held, you know, 2,000 games over a 3-day weekend, right? So our focus is not that top court or that elite athlete or that elite team. Our model is not based on you know ads and driving viewership. Our model is to cover every single court, because for every single court you have a factor of parents, coaches, family members, loved ones that want to see you know those participants play, and that is the mission of our company, is frankly to connect communities and families everywhere through the power of live sports. And you know I think that is you know was profound and a rallying cry years ago when we started this, but is even more critical today. Once these games get back going, I think we'll play an important part in making sure that these games are available for viewership, like, regardless of where you are, if you're at the event or you're not at the event.
Yeah, it seems like one of the potential factors here is we may be in a situation, at least in the short term, where things return, but they're going to limit the number of people at the games, right? So I suspect that there's a pretty good use case for how that streaming could come in handy for parents or others to engage, especially if there's limited and want to be limited in terms of the people that are being seen, associated with those matches.
Absolutely, it's something that we're actively trying to solve for with our event partners. And to your point of being proactive during this time so that you can come out of this thriving, that is a solution that we think we provide in this marketplace of fewer spectators, and there's a lot of dynamics at play and a lot of concerns for event directors if that is the new reality of youth sports. How does even in the best of times, margins were thin for event operators, right? And one of the biggest drivers on their P&L was the gate. And so if there's fewer spectators, how do we work with them to almost offer this digital gate to solve some of those problems? And we're actively thinking of ways to be flexible to make those happen for our event partners.
Yeah, so one thing as I think we talked about at the beginning of this, and I think it's important for the audience here to understand, all these people that are running these organizations, there's a larger trend here that it's important to understand, and then there's lots of ways to leverage the tools that are out there for it. And I alluded to this earlier, where as you design youth sports organizations, how are you designing them, and for that matter, local sports organizations, how are you designing them to meet where expectations are today? And that's certainly true of where kids are, say nothing in terms of where parents are, right? And so I always think about, like, as a parent, if you can go into a Starbucks and not talk to anyone and walk out with your coffee, right? That kind of access and service is what you expect when it comes to how you're interacting with any organization, right? Or if you're, in the context of your youth sports organization and experience, or your kids are playing Fortnite, Alex, you're mentioning, or other games, that's the expectation they want for everything that they're experiencing in life. And there's a lot of questions that a lot of organizations are asking about running esports right now, right? Like, should I be running esports or tournaments or games? And there very well be an opportunity to integrate that into the model, right? And there's some tournaments that have decided to run esports tournaments along it. But what is esports really about, right? At the end of the day, it's about taking the best of youth sports and local sports and bringing that into a video game environment, right? It's teams, it's leagues, it's tournaments and events in that competition in the context of playing video games. And I think the question for the world of youth and local sports is, what are we taking from the world of esports, right? What are we understanding for them? And so the question I posed to the group, and I'll start with Alex and go around, is, when you think about the underlying trends, and you alluded to this about TikTok and Fortnite, what is it that are making those experiences so powerful for kids? And how do you think youth sports organizations, local sports organizations, should think about that when they're designing their own kind of programs and experiences, being it the things that are happening in real life or the ways that they're using technology around it?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think it's pretty simple. I don't want to sound like, the reality is, I think kids, given that they've grown up in this environment in a social media environment just from day one, right? And so, like, I had Facebook in college, but they grew up with this literally since the minute they were able to access the internet. And so they're used to kind of, seeing themselves, seeing their friends on a regular basis and getting shout outs in this way digitally. And I think, we just, on HomeCourt, we're able to enable that in a really easy way, right? We are able to enable them to basically, obviously, see themselves, share their accomplishments and their achievements with their friends, with their coaches, with their parents, and in a really easy way, and allow that. And then we also, benefit from those other platforms like TikTok and Instagram, YouTube and Facebook, whatnot, being available for us, because that's where we see, our community sharing their content. And so we don't feel the need to necessarily build like our own social network. We want to just make it really easy for them to kind of, use, take their achievements and then share it in a really more the content has to be interactive and interesting, right? And so, and I think that's what TikTok has made it really, really easy to do, the short form kind of, pieces. And, that was a big thesis for, our Stay in the Game initiative. We made, obviously, HomeCourt free until April 30th. We're planning on extending that until May 30th. But part of it was just like, how do we help kids, and just communities out there find different ways to stay engaged with it, connected with their communities, even though that they're all like at home through sport. And the Stay in the Game challenges we did with like Steve Nash and Sue Bird were just trying to activate that motion a little bit, and we just kind of saw it really take off. And so I would encourage everybody here to kind of think about ways like, one of the things we do on our social media, our whole approach to it is just like, how do we curate and highlight our community and what they're doing? It's really simple. We rarely talk about what HomeCourt is doing specifically. And occasionally when you have a new release or some new stuff that we want to share, but most importantly, my team, all we do is just look at what's happening and highlight what the community is doing themselves, and they love it. We share their workouts. We want them to share it with their friends, and then we highlight when just the fun competition that's happening. And there's just like a general, and I think it's very natural, especially right now. Like the reality is we all crave that connection, especially now, but
right.
that's always been the case. And so, and I know it sounds silly, but like, having views and a like from a friend or somebody or an influencer that you look up to, it's just it's a powerful thing. And people sometimes they call it narcissism or whatever. I actually disagree. I just think people want to feel connected with their communities, and even if their communities could be people they know, but it could also be people that they're just like kind of tangentially associated with. And I think that's just a very natural thing.
Yeah, there's a few nuggets I'll pull out, and then I'm gonna throw it to Rich, because we talk about different kind of content. I think part of it's also how people are consuming content right now. But the three things that struck me in the way you responded is, one, there's this notion of gamification, right? You play sports, you see a scoreboard, and that's driving an outcome, right? But you think about how you run your practices, right? And there's like little competitions that people are excited about, right? Whether it's first to this point or how many free throws you can hit or whatever it may be. And I think there's interesting ways to think about how technology teaches the idea of how you're gamifying things, right? How you're getting that idea to make everything feel like a game, so it becomes more fun. The second is I think you talked about this idea of feeling connected, and what does that mean for how do your kids feel connected with each other? What are the ways that you're using technology and strategies around that? And then the third is your social media strategy, which is around curation and highlighting, right? And that becomes really interesting as you think about even what your kids are doing right now. What are the ways to tell the story of what they're doing and how they're doing it? And that becomes a really effective social media engagement strategy that's going to appeal to the families and potentially the kids in your programs. Rich, I'll throw it to you next, because some of this comes down to how people consume content today, right? You're mentioning that if you put up a 60-minute practice, it's very different than different kinds of content. So what expertise can you share about how people consume content these days and how that's influenced how you think about things at Famer?
Yeah, it's really everything. We felt like it was a key missing piece that was happening in the industry, because again, you see PDFs and teaching plans and YouTube videos, and they go on, and it's not the way kids consume, right? So we have a partnership with Super Soccer Stars, and we created a sizzle reel that says if you can't beat them, train them, which is a tongue-in-cheek way to say these kids, I have 2 kids, they're on mobile all the time, they're experiencing it very short form, fast, quick, right? So we always talk about the fact that you got to start with content in the way that these kids learn and engage. It's got to be short form, actionable, quick. You describe what you're trying to get the kid to accomplish, you show them what they need to accomplish, and then they go accomplish it, right? You start going on and on. We always say we think content should be no more than 1 minute. Anything more than 1 minute, you start to lose kids' attention, and you can even do it faster than that. So the other thing is, the way that we think about the world is, and you guys, and I think Alex had a lot of great points there, is the accountability is the way that we're trying to create content, and around that it feels custom, it's personal, it's localized, right? It's not just off the shelf things. It's things that are coming to you from an organization or a coach or a trainer that talks the same language that you see on the field, whether they're your coach or somebody that's part of your program. These are the ones that you're paying good fees to also. So giving them and empowering them to continue to reach you, to keep you on track, we think is something that is absolutely missing and important. But I think Alex's point around empowering the kids and making this fun and sticky and allowing them to experience it on their own, because again, the thing we always talk about at Famer is what every kid is in it for is different, right? some kids are elite and they, they're going to do great no matter what, and they're hard workers. Some kids are just trying to get better, right, for socialization or whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. So it's really important that you're empowering kids in a personal and a custom way, because depending on the age, the ability, what the kid needs to work on and what sport, like that's a big part of the way that we think about this. And everybody knows in any social, any mobile, any platform, it's very personalized and socialized. So it's really an important piece of the way that Famer runs our program.
That's awesome. We're getting lots of questions come in, so I'm going to continue to integrate them into the questions I'm posing to you guys. There's that questions tab on your right, so if you want to ask them, get them in now. We'll get, we already have quite a bit backed up, and I'll go to you, Sandeep, first, and then see if others want to comment. Which is, we're talking about these new kinds of technologies, whether it's live streaming, whether it's virtual coaching and mentoring, whether it's the idea of an AI-based tool. How do you get your coaches and staff used to these technologies, right? What is the way that you get them, to help show them, because their level of sophistication may be all over the map, let alone getting the families adopted to it. So what experience or advice do you have about how organizations can help their coaches and staff get used to this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think from the standpoint of a youth sports organization or administrator, I think step one is just staying abreast of all these sports technologies, all these great things that Famer, HomeCourt, BallerTV, what have you. There's hundreds more, and it seems like there are more entering the ecosystem, weekly. So I think staying abreast of all these technologies that are designed specifically for youth sports and amateur athletics, I think is step one. And whether it's video, whether it's AI, whether it's just organization and registration and things like that, I think there's a lot of good publications out there that do good newsletters, whether it's LeagueApps or Front Office, Sport Techie. I think those are all great resources to track what's happening in the landscape. The second thing I would recommend, like from the angle of video, because that's what we know at BallerTV, is just starting to ask the question, with your venue or with your wherever it is that your games are being held, because it's something that is becoming a common ask. It's something that not only the end user and the parents are expecting, but whether it's the venue owner or whether it's the event operator, like it is a new monetization channel that they should be exploring. And I think if the conversation isn't being had between that event operator and the venue, then without even knowing it, your video from your event might be being monetized without your buy-in. And that's a channel that, especially during these times, I think event operators need to be taking advantage of. And similar to parking and similar to snack bar at these venues that games are being held, like this is another point of negotiation that I think that all event operators, all administrators should know should be happening, and video capture is just a part of it now.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is, if I'm out there and you're evaluating technology, the advice I give to you is twofold. One, the technology should be good enough that your coaches and staff can understand it and use it. Or if it has some level of complexity, the organization you're choosing to work with has to have the ability to support and train to help you do that. If neither of those things are present, right? If they can't train you because they have a process, because the nature of the tools might need that, or if it's not as simple to use as possible, then you probably should consider a different technology option. And I know that's an approach that we certainly have at LeagueApps. Rich, I'll go to you. There's a bunch of questions coming in because a lot of organizations are using Zoom. If I go to the survey results, it was interesting, and this is probably I think the opportunity that exists out there. About half of the audience that is out there doing any kind of virtual training is using Zoom, right? And I think one of the examples that came in is they're doing strength and conditioning programs. They're doing some instructions. They're trying to pair people up to do strength and conditioning circuits with athletes. And so I'm curious to know, what do you think about the distinction between using, where's the place to use Zoom or a system like that versus a more dedicated kind of coaching platform like the one that you've created? And what advice do you have for organizations as they navigate those choices?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Things like Zoom and Instagram, obviously people are doing whatever they can to scramble just to keep that connection and that communication. And in some cases, right, organizations don't want to, give back fees. So they're like, I got to offer them something, and we're all sitting at home. So we applaud that. That doesn't conflict with what we do. We usually think that what we do is augment that. Really, for us, that's more of a one-way communication tool, right? I mean, yes, you might get likes and and waves and so forth, but it's really it doesn't empower that true mentorship, that true back and forth and two-way communication that the kids really crave. Because what we try to do is almost mirror what does happen on the field. It's an extension and enhancement of it. And while it's not, yes, you can talk live, but it's not meant to be live. It's meant to share content back and forth, videos, analysis, engagement, text, and so forth. So for us, we think that something like Famer really allows you to actually structure the content in a way that it makes sense. It's logical, it's customized, it's an extension of what you're doing. It certainly can be an extension and enhancement of live classes on Zoom, but for us, you're not going to get the impact. And then the other piece of it is, again, we know that there's a lot of organizations that are struggling right now just to do something, but if you are looking to monetize that content, it's very difficult to do that through those one-way platforms. We're finding organizations are saying, yes, I don't want to give money back, but I also am trying to find ways just to make up revenue. And with a Famer, you can actually structure it in a way that's a teaching schedule. It keeps the kids accountable. There's a two-way communication. It feels like personal training taken on mobile, which is our goal.
Yeah, it does feel like there may be specific use cases for a Zoom around some aspect of that kind of class-based kind of class-based conversation, but not the level of interactivity or specific training. And so one of the things that we can do on our blog and on our LinkedIn page is we'll post a couple of kind of tips and tricks. I know one of the questions was, how do they make sure the kids' names are up as opposed to the parents? And that may be as simple as showing you how to make sure you're using the display name right, so you know which kid you're talking to, because that would be kind of embarrassing if you don't know your kids' names. So we'll work through that stuff. One of the questions that came in for Alex is about whether there's a HomeCourt AI for soccer. Is there a way that the basketball tool is related? How does it apply to other sports or other people using it beyond just the basketball example used?
I gotta say, we're so inspired by our community because, again, I think that just kind of situations like this, people get very resourceful and very creative. When things that they're used to using get taken away, you kind of, everybody has, they say, like, you're gonna figure out a way to compete no matter what happens, right? If that means you're just competing with your brother or sister because you can't play any games, you're gonna do it. And that's why we're all, you participate in sports. So it's funny, it's interesting. We are seeing a ton of like people using HomeCourt, finding out about it, and then basically hacking it for their own sport. And it's so fun to see. So we've seen people use, we shared one actually just on our Instagram the other day. It was just like somebody dribbling a basketball with a ball control with the dots and using dribbling a soccer ball on their feet and then using it to hit the ball control dots instead of a basketball. We've seen in Thailand and Malaysia people use the cone drill, but you're using a badminton kind of like motion to hit the cone, so you're practicing your footwork. We've seen kind of CrossFit stuff. We've seen our favorite, our most interesting one that we never would have thought about was roller derby. So people are putting on skates and then doing the cone drill with skates on, back and forth and competing against one another. And so, I mean, we always felt that, Next Team was always, intentionally thought of as a mobile artificial intelligence company for sports. We just happened to start with basketball. And I don't think we would have thought, this would have happened this quickly. But like you said, like in times of crisis, I think people get really resourceful. And so, and we certainly have introduced more, generic activities on HomeCourt that are applicable to all sports. And that was always kind of our first kind of foray into that. But absolutely, we see inundated with requests from multiple sports, everything from volleyball, lacrosse, soccer, you kind of name it. And we're very excited about how we can support those communities too. So I think that's something we're certainly going to be, spending some more time on these next few months.
That's great. The final question, then I'll talk about the resources that people can leverage coming out of this call. One of the, I'll throw it to you, Sandeep, first. What are your predictions for the post-COVID world, which can't come soon enough, and what will change for how esports organizations operate? So what do you think changes coming out of this? When we talk about how you're using this opportunity to improve yourself, right? That Muhammad Ali quote, what's your prediction?
Yeah, I think in discussions with event operators, you're already seeing a lot of changes made to their process, whether it's less travel, more localized events, a lot of discussion and empathy around creating a cleaner, safer environment for the kids to play in. So I was speaking with the AAU, who's a big partner of ours, and they're already talking about passing hand sanitizers out to every participant that walks in the door, and having processes in place to wipe down the balls mid-game, how they're thinking through limited spectators and things like that. So I personally just think it's and then, sorry, another one that was actually pretty interesting is that, for those that are familiar with the tournament world in youth sports, they are forced to pack these games in a 12-hour window, right? So they'll try to get 14, 16 games on a court, as quickly as they can. The reality is, you need to be a little bit more responsible about the flow of traffic now, when teams come in, when teams, get out of that building. And so what I think you'll see is just a lot more empathy, a lot more conversation, a lot more consideration to how do I perform this event in a more responsible manner given the current conditions. So those conversations are already happening, and I think we can expect to see that, because event operators want to have these games the moment it is responsible, for them to do so, and I think they will make sure that they're doing their part.
Yeah. So the structure of those events will change. Rich, what's your prediction? What do you think is a lasting impact? What will change about how these organizations operate?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as a distance learning tool, it's an easy one in that, we think things like mobile coaching and the extension of what you're doing on the field will go from a nice to have to a must have, and you have to have some form of a backup. Like we always say at Famer, practice will never be canceled again, because forgetting whether it's a global pandemic, which, like you said, unfortunately, we hope this never happens again, but even just weather related or whatever other issues, keeping these kids on track through mobile as an extension of what you're doing is important. The other thing is, and to me, I view this, again, I can make this joke because we know coaches, trainers, they're not the most technologically advanced folks typically. This is giving them the time to say, again, this behavior is going to be advanced because they have to figure it out, right? So I can't tell you how many coaches and trainers and folks I talk to every day that say, I never thought I'd be doing this, or I didn't think I'd be doing it in this way. They're becoming content creators. They're becoming people that know how to utilize mobile technology. And it's the same thing on the other side with parents and athletes, right? So they're doing things that they haven't done before, partly because they have the time and partly because, it's the only way to engage now. So that behavior that at least people like Famer and HomeCourt and BallerTV are trying to accomplish is certainly going to be far advanced, and it's definitely here to stay.
Yeah, I echo that a lot.
Yeah.
And
Lastly,
I
Alex,
think,
what you got?
yeah, sorry, I completely, I think, just like, we ask our communities to go home and never let a crisis go to waste, work on your skills, no excuses. I think it's the same for us organizations, right? Like we also have I think a duty and responsibility to also step up our game during this time, right? And so, just because there's no practice doesn't mean you shouldn't be working on your game, right? And I think that's a very similar mentality we should take as well. And in our situation, it might be learning new technology, new organizational principles. I mean, just as an organization, how to manage meetings remotely, all these different things. But we also have a responsibility to come out of this with new skills, and then thinking about how those skills incorporate. And what's this new world that we're going to live in? How do we incorporate those best practices and skills we learned during this time into that format? And so, whether that is how do we extend, our camp to not just be these 2 hours a week that we host a camp, but how do we have camps like just a few hours a week through digital? How do I I might be teaching one topic in the camp, and how do I reinforce that when the kids go home? And how do I give them opportunities to practice what they learned as well, right? And so like we have an opportunity to kind of create this really 360, very comprehensive environment where they always get to kind of feel like they're learning something no matter where they are. And it's all going to have to integrate together to kind of be the most effective development experience for the communities that we serve. But I think we also have a responsibility to come out of this with like hardened skills as well. Like, you know, after the off season, you still only have a right hand, not a left hand. Like, you're not doing your job, right? And so I think we have a responsibility like that too.
Yeah, and look, if you're not getting better, someone else is, right? So I think that's the key aspect of it is, you know, and that's what you being a youth and local sports professional is about, is that ongoing commitment to learning. So a few points of wrapping up. There's some questions we didn't get to that we'll get to as part of the wrap up in our blog post. I know there's been some questions about being actually able to see how these tools work. So we'll include some videos or links within that write up to make sure that the people have that information and be able to speak to things around like data and data policy and privacy and things like that, that we'll get the answers from the panelists as part of that. We're a couple last kind of things that people should kind of watch out for. We'll also circulate a video that we haven't released publicly yet from the NextUp conference of Dan Porter talking about designing for youth. So check that out in the wrap up in that blog post on blog.leagueapps.com. Join the Slack group. That's another place you'll be able to find some information and resources coming out of this. I'm also put in position to engage with Rich and Sandeep and Alex and their organizations as well. And look out for other collaborations we'll be doing with these kinds of great organizations. I know with Famer, we're already up. If you go to leagueapps.com/Famer, there's an opportunity to share your interest that we offered, the opportunity to share that with Rich, because there's some integrations that we've already done with some partners. And I know we're exploring those opportunities with Baller and HomeCourt as well. Certainly eager for that. And then last but not least, I want to throw up one question to end this call, because as we think about next week, the reality is what everyone's basically saying is for the next week, the things that this country is going to experience and face is going to be pretty difficult. A lot of loss, a lot of impact. And there's a lot of questions we're getting from people about how they're dealing with their families. So if we can throw up that poll text, the question we want to ask is around about mental performance and mental health. We've got some resources that'll be at next week's town hall and some other events that we'll be doing. So stay tuned to that. And if we can throw up that survey, just take a second to answer that question, because we want to make sure that we're translating the information for next week around that. So how have you taken any steps to support the mental health of your coaches, players, and community since the start of this? If you haven't, that's understandable. If you have, let us know, because we want to make sure we're tailoring resources appropriately for you. If you check out the LeagueApps Instagram, we'll be doing something on esports tomorrow on Instagram Live that we'll be posting on the LeagueApps Instagram handle. So a lot of good stuff going on. We're going to support each other through this time. Again, take a second to answer this question. And then please join me in thanking our incredible panel, Sandeep and Rich and Alex. You guys have been tremendous. Thanks for your leadership within the youth sports industry. And thank you all for listening today. We're excited to continue to work together and be ready for what's to come. And again, if you're viewing the world the same way, you're missing an opportunity, like Muhammad Ali said. So embracing these ideas of innovation is a huge opportunity for your organization. This is Jeremy Goldberg signing off from LeagueApps. Thank you for joining us for the NextUp Town Hall. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, guys.